Good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on where in the world you are. We have a nice guest on here to Humanize IT, Matthew Hache. I got it.
Thank you.
From
You got it.
Neon
Nailed it.
Cobra. And he's here to talk about why MSPs are afraid to bill. But before we get started, who are you? And what the heck is a Neon Cobra?
Maybe we'll get into that. Yeah, so I've kind of been working in the MSP industry coming up to about maybe 12, 13 years now. I currently work, and you'll probably see in the background also, for Pax8 as really an infrastructure consultant. But what I notice a lot of times is, information for cloud computing and specifically Azure for a lot of MSPs just wasn't really digestible. A lot of times you would find here's the white pages from Microsoft and everything looks great and the articles are presented, but they don't translate to MSP. Right? They're like enterprise based, cool. Yeah, I've got this $100,000 worth of hardware, but I service, a 10 user environment. So what I found is a lot of information was flying out. So I wanted to start kind of a digestible educational series under the guise of Neon Cobra. So I try to provide MSP centric and educational videos, usually even targeted to the sales or management side of these are things in Azure you should be paying attention to. These are potential revenue buckets or revenue leakage that you might be suffering from if you are transacting, because it moves so fast. So that was the initial kind of spin up of that project. As far as where Neon Cobra came from, I'm an 80s kid, right? So born 80s, neon aesthetics, all the lasers and things like that. And I'm Canadian, so we call geese Cobra chickens because they are hyper aggressive. So if you look at my logo, it's kind of in the back. It's a snake and a goose head or a geese head.
Oh,
so
man.
That's where it originated from.
Canadian geese are just absolute dickheads. I mean,
oh man, I'd cross the street if they're there. Birds. I'm like,
well,
nope.
I'm a Midwestern boy, right? You're a goose and you come attack me.
Yeah,
I'm not running. I'll get out of your way.
Yeah,
but there's one way this is going to end if you try to bite me.
Yeah, they will. They will. It always catches people off guard too. It's like, oh, geese.
Yeah, but
nah,
that hiss and then the nip. I'm like,
it's something else.
I have no problem ridding the world of one more goose. I will have
dozens
zero remorse over this.
For sure. Yeah. You respect them from a distance. So yeah.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of people upset. You can't hurt animals. Oh, you're not gonna like me much.
Yeah, I don't actively hurt them, but I will defend myself.
Where I grew up in Western Nebraska, you grow up basically you're born and then they give you a gun so you can shoot your umbilical cord off.
Yeah. Start them young. Perfect.
Now I've moved to the city where no one really goes hunting.
Yeah. Awesome.
So the topic of today: why are MSPs afraid to bill? And you put that down as a concept that you knew a lot about, or were just willing to talk about. And we're here at the beginning of the year, so this will probably publish around February, and people are just doing their contract renewals, and you've got a lot of people out there. And I know as an engineer, I was like, oh, let me just fix this for you while I'm here.
Yeah.
Oh, this is no big deal. And so I would just fix things back in my moonlighting days.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably lost, $100,000 of revenue by just being a nice guy.
And I think that's kind of the crux of it, right? No one, it's going to sound terrible, no one starts an MSP because they love business, right? They've got a skill set. They love troubleshooting, love helping, right? The general start of any MSP is usually a technician that wants to break out and do things on their own, right? Or they found a problem that they can solve and they love doing it. And it's what we usually find, when an MSP starts to grow and you have to hire your first staff member and your first sales team, and then eventually you split off and become, the CEO of your organization, and you get out of the day-to-day. And those are traditionally very difficult jumps for a lot of organizations to do, or a lot of people to do, because it's getting rid of your baby, right? You've got emotional, you got time investment. So when you kind of boil that all down and you start looking at, why am I not charging? Because it's you want to do right? So you're going to fix that problem and you'll go the extra mile, and you're probably used to doing this, right? Especially if you came from an enterprise, you'd go above and beyond. That's how to get your accolades. But in the MSP space, what that ends up doing is it kind of undermines your business model, right? If you're not tracking metrics, if you're not billing on a regular interval, if you're not billing for the time and your knowledge, you're working for free. And it becomes very blurred when you're either working for yourself, or even if you're a much larger organization and things aren't being captured. you'll find a lot of times organizations when they're starting to hit that operational maturity level where they need to make the next step of, do I hire sales? Do I hire a new manager? The first question they usually get asked is like, well, how profitable are your clients? And if you're not tracking and billing for everything you do, you will never know that, right? On paper, you could be, it looks like you're hemorrhaging cash, or rather, making a massive amount of profits. But if, you or your technicians are working 12-hour days to service that client and you're not billing for it, like the only person that's losing is the organization.
Yep.
And that'll have catalyst effects where, if you don't profit, if you don't work well and be able to balance work and life and ensure that you are a profitable organization, you inevitably drag your clients down with you. Because then you don't have the time to stay skilled, to, stay healthy, to invest in new tech, invest in yourself, invest in the business. So
yeah, I think what happens is, and as I grew as an engineer in the corporate world, so I took a different road, a different track than a lot of people did. I had some great mentors. I had some very excellent business-minded people. When in the corporate world, it's the opposite. Most of the people you deal with have business minds of some kind, and you're learning from them. They don't have technology, so you spend a lot of time drinking pints, having your buddy Dave help you with budget analysis, because you know what? You give me a firewall, I will find you all your shadowed rules. I will deal with efficiencies, and I'll do that. You give me a line item spreadsheet and you're going to get a crayon drawing back.
Yeah.
And
if you're lucky,
I started learning things like cost center analysis. I started learning all these things that actually show you, how are you actually making money? And you can look like a profitable company and be hemorrhaging cash. And I've heard this from MSPs before, like they bill and for some reason they're still coming in the negative every month. And they can't figure out why. And so what you said, like you're either donating time because you are not tracking that, or you're donating services and efforts and you're not tracking that. And so you're coming out behind, and eventually that will come up to bite you.
Right. It's a really difficult thing to navigate, right? Like, because, when we talk about the profitability or where an MSP might sit as like, how successful on the books are you versus like how successfully run are you? You can get metrics like how many techs per endpoints and, what's your utilization rates and what's the percentage of margin and all these different things. But, I think one of the biggest things is like giving free work away or not being able to justify your expertise. Like, you'll hear it all the time.
Imposter syndrome.
Exactly. Like that's, if we had to distill it down.
I've only been working with FortiGates for 6 months. Why should I be charging for this?
Yeah. Even it's like, this is the first time I've ever done this. Why should I be charging with this? This is a learning experience. Maybe we'll learn. Okay. Like I understand that, but there is years of additional wealth and pseudo knowledge of the industry and all the tech you're working with, that you now have to bring to the table, even if it's a brand new technology, even if you're going from on-premise to cloud, it could be a whole new thing you're learning. But like, do you know Windows operating systems? Do you know like password management? Do you know like basic networking? Well, yeah, that's stuff that we take for granted. I like to use an example of like, am I so skilled? Like, am I skilled or am I just like an imposter? And it's like, does my mom know this? Does my dad know this? They are very, very smart individuals. Do they have any idea what an IP address is? Like, does any of that stuff resonate with them? I think we get so far into our industry sometimes, even in the channel, where we see these brilliant minds, that are publicly, I don't want to hate the term influencer, but like are out there actively engaging and leading and helping the industry.
They're public figures.
Public figures, right? And then you realize in the end being like, oh, maybe I can't hold a candle to them, but that doesn't mean I'm any of a lesser technician or person. I still have an immense wealth of knowledge and maybe even specific knowledge to our vertical or even our small town or our city, right? You have to value yourself and your time is valuable. So when the person says like, hey, you billed me for an hour, you were only here for 5 minutes. That's the common saying. I was only here for 5 minutes because of my experience. Like, how long do you think?
It's the $10,000 hammer, right?
Yeah. It's like we've got the tool and then you get into like your tools, right? You'd say, oh yeah, that was really quick because I've got thousands and thousands of dollars in tools, in investment to make it this easy.
Well,
right?
Do you know the analogy of the $10,000 hammer?
Run it past the group.
It's also known as the old hat engineer,
Okay.
This old hat engineer retires and at this manufacturing plant, and the engine breaks down. They can't. All the apprentices work on it. All the journeymen work on it. They cannot figure out how to get this engine running again. So they call the old hat engineer. He comes in, says, looks at it, pulls out a hammer and whacks the engine once. Everything starts up.
Yeah.
Walks out, hands him a bill for $10,000. And the manager goes, "I'm not paying this. You were here for like 1 minute. Can you give me an item breakdown of what this is?" And so it's like, cost of hammer, $5. Knowing where to hit, $9,995.
Just a MasterCard commercial or a Visa commercial.
Yeah, it's a very old story. Like this goes back to the 1800s. You can trace it back, and this idea of like trade skills. Skill is what people are paying for. Yes, it only took me 5 minutes where it took you 4 hours. That's because I spent the last 20 years learning this stuff the hard way. So when I came in, I made it look easy. I have this other story I tell, personal story. When I was in college, I was getting a Bachelor of Science, Computer Science. I think I was a senior at this time. And back then we had computer labs. You used to have to go to a lab to actually work on computers. And I'm sitting there working on I think it was assembly. I had a class in assembly. I was like 5 subroutines deep. I've got pictures all over the wall of where I am in my subroutines, where my O's, my I's are. And this girl comes up to me. She's a freshman. She's in education, and she has to take her programming class because she's going to be a math teacher.
Yeah.
And she is just distraught. Like, I cannot figure out this day of the week program. I know it's not your day to tutor, Adam, but can you help me? And I'm like, okay, well, which program is it? She goes, it's day of the week. Like, okay, can you give me 15 minutes?
Yeah.
And so she walks back to her area of the lab, and I watch her leave, and then I close out of my like I was using Vi at the time, and I type this whole program up, and I compile it, a couple errors. It's good enough. I know the gist of the algorithm. And I walk over to her desk, and I'm like, okay, and I printed it out, and it's like, hey, what do you got here? And she's like, did you just write this entire program? Like, yes.
It's magic what we do sometimes. Yeah.
I've been working on this for 12 hours.
Yeah.
I cannot figure this out. And like, she just bent it just for 10 minutes there. I said,
I think
it's easier.
It's one of those, it's time in, and we'll see it. I'll have a lot of what I do in my day to day is like helping MSPs just like even unravel Azure and cloud computing. And there's this level of like frustration. I don't know what it is, where like you start talking to them and they're like, this is just so hard. And I'm like, you got to take it one step at a time. You're not any lesser of a technician or an MSP because you don't understand this. Because like, quite honestly, I've made a full-time 9-to-5 job, literally just keeping up with updates from Microsoft sometimes. And I'll be on a call with someone and it actively changes between like 12 and 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
So to be realistic of like what it takes for you to stay up to speed on that, it's just not possible. So you need to understand that you are not a failure of a tech or failure of MSP because you didn't know that. You need to embrace the learning. You need to be embraced being proven wrong.
Yes.
But in the end, like it can be I've had it happen in my career before where I had a client prove me wrong, right? We get in this, like when we're dealing from like IT professional, okay, you had experience with that. You proved me wrong. I can cede the floor to you in your excellence in this point. But like when a client who, you might've been like, this person doesn't know IT, another ticket comes in, and then like you start diving, it's like, oh man, they were right. That's a very humbling moment. You still need to be able to charge for that, right? Because it's a moving target. You are a trusted individual. You need to treat them, you are the subject matter expert in any sense, even if you're a lowly help desk. And I really don't even want to use that term. Help desk is a crucial role, right? They are the filter, they are the front line. But if you're in the help desk to the sysadmin, you always have to consider yourself a subject matter expert. Your time is valuable. If you're working for the MSP, you need to bill for that, right? Because they are investing in you day in and day out, even if it's not training or education plans, just you being there, having access and exposure to the systems makes you a better subject matter expert every month, every day.
And I want to put this out there. They're not paying for your skill as much as they're paying for you. right? So Adam Walter used to be a decent networking engineer. Now, compared to the people above me,
Oh yeah.
the Cisco certified internet engineers,
Yeah.
I was a moron. But
That's
for the average small business, if I walked in there, I was the highest you could get.
yeah.
Right. And if you brought me in there to work on Cisco, I was pretty familiar. I got me to work on Checkpoint, I was very familiar. If you got me to work in on FortiGate, I was very familiar. What if you had a different firewall? Should I charge less? No.
Huh?
You know, I'm going to walk in there and I'm going to figure it out. But that architecture knowledge is what is key.
Even the troubleshooting, right?
A good engineer doesn't care what the technology is. They care about what the purpose is.
Yeah.
And they're going to help you. Like, a shadowed rule is a shadowed rule, people. I don't care what firewall it is. An object is an object in Active Directory or Salt Stack or Chef or whatever. It's an object. It serves a purpose. It's going to authenticate this user and it's going to hand off a set of permissions. It's an object.
I think a really good way.
IPX, IPv4, it's still just protocol traffic.
Yeah. So I think when you break it down like that, you know, if you kind of want a tidbit or a slice to take away from this, like you as an SME, you know, subject matter expert, if you walk in and there's, say, a firewall that you're familiar with, it's going to take you 30 minutes. You're going to charge your 30 minutes. You go into the next client and there's one you've never seen before. Your first instincts will be like, oh, I'll discount while I learn this. No, you should be charging an hour because you are still the expert, but now you have to spend time learning because they didn't follow, you know, your specific protocols. This is not any lesser. You will see this in almost any industry you go to, right? Like if you bring like a BMW to a Dodge dealership, they'll probably try to still service it, but you're getting it at a premium because they have to figure out things. It's not their wheelhouse. They got to order parts and it takes longer. They bill you for that, right? If you've got trusted people that you're working with, but you're not following the zone of influence that they generally work within, right? Their trusted stack and things like that, they will still help you. I would hope, but it's going to take longer. And they shouldn't have to do that at a deficit because the second you do that as a deficit is the second you start losing money, even though you're providing the same level of service, it just takes a little bit longer because it's new.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's the intangible knowledge, you know, I hate to say it, it's the wisdom that you're paying for. You get a senior engineer in there who's never dealt with Azure before. Like, okay, let's take Adam Walter here. I have never had to deal with Azure outside of just dinking around with it. You know what I have a ton of experience with? Windows Server 2008 R2.
Oh, man.
I'm willing to bet that Adam Walter walking in there with my 10 years of experience of NT 4.0 all the way to 2008 R2 is still going to be very valuable in an Azure environment. It's just going to be slower. I still understand and know best practices for the Microsoft environment. I have a lot of experience in modern security practices, pen testing, and attack vectors and surface areas. The fact that I have to learn a console in Azure is not the most difficult thing I've had to do in my career.
Right.
I'm still going to charge you $300 to $500 an hour.
Yeah. You'll even see it.
If you as the client want to save money, you might find a specialist organization that only charges $175 an hour to work on Azure. But will they have the expertise in security, in firewall analysis, in networking design, in
will they know your
just
environment?
Relating to you as a customer? Will they have that same experience? Probably not. But you're gonna save some money. I'm still gonna charge $300 an hour. In fact, my actual going rate is $500 an hour for consultation. If you want me to work on the firewall, I'll work on it. If you want me to push a mop for $500 an hour, I will. I'm humble. I know how to operate a mop. I have 4 kids.
Yeah.
But you as an organization are hiring Adam Walter and all of his expertise. How you use it is up to you. I'm still going to bill you the same rate. I'm not going to discount who I am because I'm not working at my full capacity. I
find a lot of the times, you know, it's generally the smaller MSPs that suffer from this problem, right? Because they are directly invested in the clients. Maybe it's the client that they started their practice off of. And it's tough because, like, they were there to help you. They were able to supplement your business when you first started. So you want to help them out. And sometimes, there is business cases for this where it's like, I'll pat your back, you pat mine. But as you grow, it's something that you need to be able to have these business level conversations. I've always said, never be afraid to make a profit, right? Because the second you're not making a profit, it's the second you're slowly starting to file for bankruptcy and shut down. And that doesn't help anybody. Doesn't help your staff, doesn't help you, doesn't help the clients you're servicing. If they want to chase, a cost per seat that's $15 cheaper per month, so then you then lower your rates by $15 per seat per month just to maintain a client, and that puts you in the hole, right? It's really hard to do parity services. They might have the exact same stack as you, but they don't have the technicians that know the environment. Maybe they don't have someone that lives nearby. You already know what the service stack is with this MSP. So stand your ground, sell on value, right? Don't try to get down and knit and grit, and because like all that could happen is they move to the other MSP and it's like, oh yeah, you're not getting CrowdStrike with us. For another $15, we can give that to you. And you're not getting parity services. Focus on the business outcomes, focus on the values, drive that value, right? It can be incredibly tough. It involves being more integrated, almost like a virtual CIO or whatever terms you want to use. It has you be more integrated with the or with the clients you're servicing, so you know what's going on. It is the true evolution from break-fix to MSP is being involved in their business, and technology is the part of it you wield, but you are directly involved in their success and profitability and growth, because if they're profitable, you're profitable. And it's really easy to justify that when you show them how much you've helped them grow. They'll forget sometimes, and you say like, hey, remember when you were 6 users and now you're 30? We got you there. We were part of that. We brought the infrastructure. We brought the growth. We helped you plan for it, right? Because you weren't buying a server every 2 years. We forward planned. We worked with what you had. We got you to this point.
I think it's a great way to sum up this podcast. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about this in our next episode coming up, called Training Your Teams. Teaching your teams how to see their value is a really important part. And there's a bunch of other things we need to talk about in how to train your teams.
Yeah.
I know we talked about this at the Leadership Lab at Ninja on the 7th of January. And I really want to deep dive into this, like finding that value, showing value, not just from tickets closed, but actually relationship. Right. So that your client appreciates you for the person you are, not just the technician you are. Yeah. So thank you very much for talking here, Matthew. We'll see you next week on Training Your Teams.
Cheers.